Okay, we're live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest. His name is Spencer Schneider, and he's just published a really fascinating book. Title of the book is Manhattan Cult Story, My Unbelievable True Story of Sex, Crimes, Chaos, and Survival. And I highly recommend this book. It's very interesting. It goes into his detail about how he got involved in a group for over 20 years. And he is an attorney who specializes in corporate litigation in New York. He's also a native of Brooklyn and is an open water marathon swimmer and ice water swimmer. He works as an ocean lifeguard, operates a lifeguard training academy, and co-founded a water rescue group. He's the only member or former member of what he calls, or what is called, school to have published his experience in the cult. He was a member of the Inner Circle for 23 years, and he has a blog about his experience titled Cult Revolt. He's a contributing writer for East Magazine and lives in New York City and East Hampton. And I'll put his contact information in there. But Spencer Schneider, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here.
So for people, this is a fascinating book. This is your first book. Can you kind of talk about your life leading up to this kind of momentous meeting with a guy you call Bruce and how you really got involved in this very curious group in Manhattan?
Yeah, sure. I'm from Long Island, in the suburbs of New York. I was, grew up in a fairly middle-class background, wanting nothing. College educated, went to law school, had lots of friends, had a great job when I got out of law school. Nothing remarkable except maybe my father passing away when I was 25. Working very hard as an attorney in Manhattan in the late 80s, which was an exciting time.
And so you were in kind of downtown Manhattan working long hours, and you met up with a friend, Bruce, and that's kind of where it all started, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I had met this guy named Bruce in a bar in Tribeca, where he was working as a bartender. I was playing in a band there on the weekends, which was, like a hobby of mine. And excuse me, he befriended me and gained my trust. He was, Ivy educated fellow who was working on the bar on weekends. And over a period of time, he was showing great interest in me, and eventually made an invitation to join what he called an esoteric school for inner development.
And can you talk about how they kind of spotted you, talent spotted you as somebody who could be in that group, but he kind of lured you in with the enticement of this kind of secret group. Can you talk about what the selling points were?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I wasn't really looking for anything. I'm not spiritually minded. I'm secular Jewish, and I kind of had everything I wanted. So I was doing just fine. But what he said about the group piqued my interest, because he said it was based upon an ancient philosophy, and that this group was secret, and that it consisted of other people like myself who would study the philosophy of Gurdjieff and of Ouspensky, which were part of the fourth way. Philosophers I never heard of, even though I had a philosophy major. And that appealed to me. I kind of missed learning. I missed intellectual rigors. And while I was very suspicious of this, I figured I'd give it a crack. The other lore was that he had wonderful friends. And he introduced me to a woman who was in the group and who was also extremely impressive in her background. And I could see that they had this tremendous bond together, which was unlike anything I'd seen in just casual friendships. So it was a very sophisticated and very specific type of recruitment that they had.
Right. So they're looking for people who are educated, professionals, had some money, it seems like. Can you talk what it was like getting invited to that first meeting and what that first meeting was like?
Yeah, sure. So we met at a secret location. He didn't tell me where we were going until the last moment. He kind of led me to this loft in Tribeca in a summer night, and we got up into a room, just an unremarkable loft with about 60 people milling about. It didn't look like it was a school or of ancient knowledge. It was just a bunch of white people like me, coming from the bank, coming from law offices, from the emergency room, whatnot. And the discussion was rather dry, and I wasn't really inclined to return, but I did.
Right. So there's something there, but you talked Gurdjieff, who was kind of a known
Right.
New Age, maybe modern philosopher, and he ended up in France, I believe. But
Right.
they kind of had this, it was called these secret terms, the school, the place. So it kind of had this, but the selling point was that you could learn and evolve, right? That was kind of what the goal was for your personal development.
Exactly. That these ideas, this philosophy was very practical, and could be used as sort of a tool to navigate, people's lives and, find meaning and, improve your job, improve all of these things that are very of interest to most New Yorkers, most people. But the trappings of it were very, familiar to me in a certain way. People sitting around and talking about ideas. So I suffered a crisis in that first month, which was that I lost my job. And I found they were extremely supportive and very helpful to me, the leaders and the other members, and, found the sense of community that, frankly had been missing. And it was a little bit like falling in love. It's like, it was very irrational. It didn't really make sense, but it was very strong and a compelling proposition to continue with these people.
And it was you could sense at the beginning, there was like an interior structure. So you had these teachers, and can you talk about how it unraveled to you and what the teachings were and how the organization kind of functioned?
Yes, it was very hierarchical. There were, two teachers sitting in front of a room, basically lecturing throughout, an evening twice a week. I mean, that's really what it was. But it came to really fill my life because they insisted that we come in and talk about our personal lives. And they gave advice based upon their interpretation of the Gurdjieff ideas. And the advice really crossed boundaries, so much so that your thinking was sort of permeated by the advice that they gave to people, which could be also very harsh at times. And, they used all the tools that cults use, really gaslighting people and
love bombing. It seems like you got one of the first introductions, which is, we're there for you, we support you, that kind of thing. That's also another term.
Exactly. I mean, you mentioned Rick Ross. I should just say that Rick, I know Rick. He actually wrote a blurb for the book, and he's an expert in cults. He said that this is one of the most secretive cults he'd ever come across in all of his time, and that he had tried without success to get people out. That's how gripping and how gripped many of its members were.
It really is kind of different from all the other cults. Either have some address or corporate name, NXIVM, Scientology. This is super vague, and they keep insisting on invisibility, secrecy. So when you were in it, your family and friends before that had no idea, right?
That's right. I never told a single soul about it for 23 years. Many people, many married people never told their spouses. Folks never told their children, their families, their best friends. I mean, for all people knew, I'm a lawyer. My clients didn't know. Nobody knew. And that was deliberate. If I could explain why. I mean, the leaders were, we didn't know this, but had been driven out of San Francisco because of a lot of controversy. And when they came to New York, they decided to just go seriously underground and continue by really trying to attract richer people and charging more. So they changed their business model, so to speak.
So there was a business, but like the first thing was for you, all they were asking was $300 a month, right? That's where.
That's right. That's right. It was $300 a month, and then it sort of built up through the years, probably to about $400 or $500 a month, because they had all these extras. But this was a business. It was a big business that generated, I estimate over $1.2 million a year in cash for the leader.
That's a lot. And so they had this thing. You had to get 2 books. It was Psychology of Man's Possible Evolution and Search for the Miraculous. But they insisted kind of on this Gurdjieff psychology and abandon kind of standard, maybe Freudian or more commonly understood kind of psychology, right? So you kind of,
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, in fact, we were forbidden from seeing psychiatrists or therapists because I guess the view was that we would maybe possibly reveal the existence of what we called school, but also because they really looked down on modern psychology. They thought dreams had no meaning, and they had their own conception of the way people's psychology worked, which may have some merits. It's based upon some Eastern philosophies, but it's really a hodgepodge of ideas that I really can't subscribe to right now anymore. But it was useful to help control people. I would say I would leave it like that.
But they had this kind of thing. There was all this numerology. There was the 7.
Right.
It was almost like chakras or something. You were number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 4th way. So there really was this kind of, you're supposed to emulate these certain doctrines to become a more full person, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And some of them were attractive, like the law of 7 is about, is based upon the octave, and that there's 7, notes in an octave, or 8. I forgot exactly what is. I think it's 8 notes in the octave, which sort of represents how one goes about achieving a goal. And these were all very, interesting ideas. I don't know where they got them from, but there was also this cosmology of emanations coming from the absolute. That was called the ray of creation. And we spent, years literally talking about these ideas over and over again.
Right. So you're almost getting the same doctrine in a kind of a loop. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, and which leads to people, being extremely bored and depressed, but they're so attached to it, and it really is like your whole mind, that it's very hard to escape it. But that's a perfect way of putting it. It is,
and there's no, and even it's invisible, but you're not supposed to acknowledge fellow class group members, school members, actually is probably the right term, outside of these meetings that happen twice a week, right?
That's correct. We were forbidden to fraternize in any way with anyone who was in the group. We were told, "Oh, this is a special place. This is the place to talk to these people. Nowhere else. It'll create a different environment." And it certainly did. I mean, it was kind of interesting to just see these people only in one place, not talk to them about anything else, and not call them on the phone. And if I saw someone in the street, in the subway, you just kind of like maybe nod and move on.
Wow, that's really incredible. And so you're learning all this Gurdjieff stuff. You're learning the sustainers. There's this hierarchy, and you never really saw or understood that there was kind of a top person for a year, right? Is that right?
That's exactly right. The leader, yeah, sure. I mean, we had 2 leaders at the beginning who were, we became attached to them after a while, and suddenly a woman appeared after about a year, whose name was Sharon. We were told her name was Sharon. Found out later it was Sharon Gans. And if there had been an internet, I would have been able to find out that she had been an actress in the 60s and 70s, had been in Slaughterhouse-5. And that would have been about as much as I would have known about her, including that she was exposed by the San Francisco Chronicle as being a cult leader in San Francisco. But I couldn't possibly know about this. She appeared.
Can you talk about her cult background in San Francisco a little bit? What cult was she in? The same type of structure in San Francisco, or she changed it?
She changed the structure. It was the same philosophy based upon, the fourth way. Her and her husband, her second husband, his name was Alex Horn. And Alex Horn had some connection with some of the Gurdjieff folks. And he'd also had a cult in Sonoma with his then wife. And I think one of the branches of that cult became the Fellowship of Friends, which still exists in San Francisco. And there was recent news about them. They're a very dangerous group. And so Alex and Sharon, they fancied themselves as an actress and a screenwriter. And they started this theater called the Theater of All Possibilities, which was a front really for a cult. I mean, they had their members of the theater group would be forced to sell tickets to their horrible shows. And they had this sort of communal kind of life, young folks. And there was a lot of abuse. There was sexual abuse and physical abuse and forced labor. And it was a pretty ugly situation.
So that guy Burton, I just read about him. So she was associated with this guy Burton, and he was a predator, I think, of younger men, if I remember.
Yes. Yes. Burton supposedly got his whole philosophy from Alex Horn.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
wow. See, I didn't know that connection. Okay. So you were kind of like an offshoot of this Fellowship of Friends.
No, the Fellowship was an offshoot of Alex Horn.
Oh, okay. And Alex Horn was with Sharon Gans, right? They were either
exactly.
Okay, I see now. Okay, so wow, that's amazing. So you see this person, she kind of exhibited all of like the secrecy and cult-like behavior of like. Can you talk about what it was like seeing her and how people adapted to her or reacted to her?
Yeah, I mean, it was a shocking appearance. I mean, we had no idea who this woman was, and all of a sudden she was shown amazing deference by the people who led the group. And, she was much older, and her appearance was bizarre. I mean, she kind of dressed like as a queen, from a Shakespearean period piece, long red hair and very pale skin. And an extremely, regal appearance. And you could tell she thought very highly of herself. And she talked about sex the first night, and it was really off-putting. It just had nothing to do with what we were talking about. And I wasn't inclined to return, but, I've been in it for a year. And we found that she, was very charming. She could be very loving to people, and but also very frightening. And so this was a new component. It just changed the dynamics of everything. All of a sudden, we had this new leader.
A new leader in the group. And I mean, she really had the circle around her. And how did this kind of teaching, kind of learning group kind of turn into the kind of coercive, manipulative, controlling group? Like, it didn't start right away, right?
No, not at all. I would never join a cult, and nobody there would. But I think what happened is that there was this hook, where they made you really feel like this was a place where you could learn something that you could learn nowhere else. And they convinced you that the things that were good in your life were due to them, and that bad things would happen to you if you left. It's really that simple. And they were able to instill this through, just years and years of indoctrination. And eventually, eventually you find yourself really stuck along with these other people. But I should say there's another side to this, which is that the early years were fun. It's kind of like having a parent who, or any authority figure in your life can be, like borderline, like switching back from one way to another, and you really don't know which way they're going to be on what day, and it can be very unnerving, and you just feel like you have no choice but to just deal with it because you feel you need them.
And she had a very high opinion of herself to you guys. She said, I remember this from your book. Can you talk about what she said about herself?
Yeah, I mean, the first night she told us that she was almost on the level of Buddha. She wasn't quite there, but would be there soon enough. And, I did a double take and I looked around the room and everybody else was also, what is this? But the leaders who we had for a year didn't question this. They were like, yeah, we agree. And over time, we came to believe this because it was continually drilled into us. And we were told, hey, you don't know what a conscious man or woman looks like. When she's angry, it's really conscious anger. When she's wrathful, it's conscious. And so all of these really negative attributes were fed to us as being a consciousness. And you couldn't dissent, you couldn't disagree with any of this. But again, it's slow. It's not overnight. It takes time. They do it piece by piece.
Right. And I mean, and it was very strange too. When she showed up, that was the first time you realized there was somebody above Fred and Priscilla, right? So it must have been very strange to have her kind of show up and like, here's the secret boss. It's almost like the Process Church or something. And
it was weird. It was like you found out that you were adopted, like you'd never known. I was like, what? There's another leader here. So it shifted everything because it became this, further hierarchy, which was, unnerving.
And you guys kind of partied together too. So you would go on day trips or rent boats or go fishing. Can you kind of talk about how they created this kind of group environment?
Sure. But let me just add, you raised one thought that I forgot about, was that there was such mystery about the group. I mean, they really didn't tell us much about themselves or who they were. We knew Fred's name, we knew Priscilla's name, but not their last name. We didn't really know what they did. Like I say, Sharon, we didn't know where she lived or if she had a family or anything about her. Most of the stuff I found out about her was after the fact. And also because I eventually became very close with her. But in the early days, they tried to make it fun. We'd go out and go. We went out overnight fishing on a boat. We had a Western themed party, sort of like a surprise party that was thrown for us by some of the older students. There were Christmas parties. But then in between all this, there could be classes that we would have on a regular night where they would be very abusive to people. So one night it's great. One night it's miserable. It was sort of like you get whiplash really from the whole experience.
It's kind of like an abusive relationship in a lot of ways too. It seems like they're almost conditioning you,
Yeah.
Can we get them to come back and abuse them and do all that stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I mean, it's really incredible too. And like, what's odd, and I was curious, is that these are all talented people. You had people who were like money managers. You had high power people, Ivy League school. So what about that made, like, sometimes some people are kind of hapless. It seems like you guys were all really intelligent. How do you think they were able to kind of tie you into that group? What do you think that happened?
Well, I mean, people who run cults or very charismatic people who are narcissistic and psychotic or what have you, they swim in different waters and they are very good at identifying weaknesses in people. And Sharon and Alex and Fred and the others are very good at, giving people what they want by knowing what their vulnerabilities are. And I think, it was different for a lot of people there because, there were a few hundred people there at any given time. But I think that the central thing was that people lack community. It's lonely when you're young, in an urban setting, and people are disconnected from their families. And, people are looking to start new families. And this was a place where, families started, there were some very deep friendships that arose. So, it doesn't matter, what that we were educated or not. And it's, people look at me and they say, you're the last person I would expect to be in a cult. I mean, you had a really good background, you had a good job, you're a trial lawyer. I mean, you can tell who's lying and who's not, but anyone can be duped.
It's the famous statement of everybody in a cult. Nobody ever thinks they're in a cult. That's the whole thing. Like once they realize they're in a cult, they get out. So nobody, or they think they're in some kind of thing. So it's something more profound than being super intelligent or more intelligence. There's others, the social dynamics. And you do label this group a cult, right? I mean, how do you specify that term? Like everybody may have a different definition of cult. What's your definition of cult and how does it apply to this group?
Yeah, like Rick Ross has his own definition. Mine is, very much similar, I think, to most of the experts, but I probably put it in my own language, which is very simple. I mean, there is a charismatic leader who seeks to exploit people. They don't tolerate dissent. If you violate any of the strict rules, you're punished. And that includes being ostracized. That you will give an inordinate amount of money or time to the group with the promise that your time and money will translate into more time and money for you. And I think that's pretty much the hallmarks, which leads, and I should add, it leads to this kind of exploitation, is usually through coercion. It could be physical, it could be mental, it could be a combination of both.
And I've heard that term. The definition of a cult, I don't know if it's Ross's. Well, I think it's the bite model for Hassan, but Ross's is coercive control. So
coercive control.
I think that's his phrase. And they kind of controlled relationships too, like who to fall in love with, who to have, relations with. Can you kind of talk about how they manipulated people in that regard?
Sure. And let me add this one other element, which I think will help answer this question, which is deception. Everyone who comes out of a cult, and I've met people recently who've gotten out of this cult, who found out about my book, and because they don't know the history of the group, because it's still going on today, and they all feel duped, lied to. Sharon and the leaders really regulated relationships. They didn't allow people to get together without their permission. And she allowed people to get married if she thought the relationship would benefit her, and that people would stay if they got married. So there were marriages that were arranged. My marriage was, for all intents and purposes, arranged with someone else in the group. She often arranged private adoptions among members of the group. She would encourage people to have affairs in the group with other people, which was coercive. She was able to convince people to, donate large amounts of money to her if they had extra income, and regulated, all of our thoughts, really. I mean, eventually there was just no boundaries and no limits.
Wow. So they it just is that process of breaking down I think you write in free will, or It's very curious. It's unfortunate. And you, I mean, what point did you go, I'm done? Like, how did you get out?
Yeah, I mean, it was really a long process. I was very unhappy for a long time, but I was really stuck there through various things in my personal life, my marriage and my work, and both of which I felt I would lose if I left the cult. But eventually I began to see how little regard that the leaders had for me. I had always believed that they had my self-interest, my best interests at heart, but I learned through a lot of suffering, a lot of pain that they didn't. And I think the straw that broke the camel back was when the leader attacked one of the women in a very vicious way. There was a lot of public humiliation in the groups, and I just witnessed that one night, and that was pretty much the end of it. Just had to leave.
Just kind of get out. Like you had just a random interaction with the stewardess, and it seemed like she gave you just like, hey, this doesn't something not right here, right, Spencer?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I forgot about that story. Yeah. While I was really on the edge of wanting to leave, I finally revealed the existence of the cult to someone. It was a flight attendant who I met and actually started dating, and told her I felt safe with her and that I could tell her about it. And I told her it was a secret group, and she said, that doesn't sound right to me. And that all the bells went off. And it really wasn't until the day I left afterwards that I thought, oh, wow, that was a cult.
Oh, interesting. And it was interesting, like you had to kind of go through that process too of coming out, seeing a therapist, seeing Bruce again. I thought it was pretty interesting that you had the courage to kind of reach out to the guy who got you in there.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to reach out to people because after people left the group, you weren't allowed to talk to them if you're in the group. Bruce had left years before, and I called him up. I said, I'm out, and we got together. And, I told him, I said, I'm a little mad at you that you invited me. And, he apologized. An apology I accepted because I knew that he was also under the grips of this cult, and he did recruiting really thinking that he was doing me a favor. But he did apologize, and I accepted it. Yeah.
And do you feel writing this book, you're the first person who's written about the school? Do you feel like you're in danger, or you could be sued, or there could be consequences from writing this book?
I've been talking about this group publicly for about 6 or 7 years. I'm one of 2 bloggers, and I have never had any contact. I haven't been contacted by them. This is a slightly different scale. You could see I'm online here with you, talking, showing my face, detailing this book, which contains many details that have never been out there, even on my blog, about this group and about my personal life. But we'll see if they do anything.
And you kind of were able to see kind of other members in the kind of coercive group community too after you came out through the blog, right?
Right. I met the blog. The intention was to sort of expose them because it was so secretive, and to really, give voice to other people who wanted to talk about the group, even anonymously. And I met up with a lot of survivors, and it was a very healing process for people to get together. But a lot of I shouldn't say. I mean, I wasn't the only one. Blogging. There was 1 or 2 others at the time, and people were getting together, but I without me before I got out, obviously. But it was a good time for me to really come to grips with what had happened, and to give everyone an opportunity to talk about it.
And this was the article that I mentioned. This is in the news. Yeah. This is a very recent article, June 16th. about the Fellowship of Friends in Oregon House, California. And this
Yep.
character, and this is Google. So you're in the news with this new book, and this whole, the fourth way is right here, and there's a picture of Robert Earl Burton, who's an associate of Sharon Gans.
That's right.
Husband. And there's tons of money involved in this. It sounds a lot like the same experiences you had, unfortunately. So secrecy, looking for talented, intelligent people, like they're going after Google employees, right? So,
That's right. That's right. They have a real stronghold over that. And Sharon also created businesses. Members would create businesses that were really fronts for her vast empire of money and real estate. Differences. I was just going to say the difference is that Sharon was secretive about it. She didn't want anybody to know her business, but it's coming out now. The New York Post actually did 2 stories about my book in the last week, and they're talking about the current iteration of the group, because she died about a year and a half ago. Sharon.
She died 85, so she kind of was in that game
for
a long time. How old was she?
Yeah, she was 85. Yes, correct. I'm sorry. She died when she was 85 in the beginning of last year.
Like the COVID epidemic, she was didn't make it, right? And so you have a picture of her buried with Horn too, right? They're buried next to each other.
Right. They're buried out in Long Island, in East Hampton.
Did you find writing this book was kind of a cathartic? How did you feel putting this information on page and putting it out into the public?
Yes. I mean, it was cathartic in the sense of being able to finally get it all out and getting it done. The main reason I did it was to really expose this group and to show, to other people who are in this group really, or any kind of abusive relationship or traumatic situation, is that there's really hope. You can get out of these groups. You can recover. As low as I was, I managed to get things together. I had a lot of help, great family and friends, but it's a cautionary tale, but it's also a story about hope.
Yeah, and it really is unbelievable. Like, the secret group barely has a name. Nobody talks outside of it's. I had this weird, when I was reading through the book, like it was Fight Club or something. Like, not as like that, but almost like this secret group that has meetings and they nod at each other, just like in Fight Club. Like, they really structured a very curious group. And she made, you said, 1.2 million a year. Did she live? She ended up living in the Waldorf Astoria or
the Plaza Hotel. She had an $8.5 million apartment that was paid for by certain members of the group, and she passed away there. She had homes in the Hamptons, in Mexico.
Did you ever see any overlap of this group with other kind of groups? Nexium was in New York, I know that, but
so I never did. But one of the members of Nexium, Sarah Edmondson, who was the main whistleblower of Nexium and was in The Vow, along with Rick Ross, actually. She interviewed me for her podcast, and she said to me that she thought that Keith Raniere must have been in this cult because some of his techniques were very similar. And I said I'd never heard of him before, and she insisted that they were so similar, he had to have been involved. But whether that happened or not, I don't know.
And you said you started in 92 or 93. Was that group fully functioning? I mean, it seemed like that was fully functioning and operating at that time. How far back did it go? Do you know?
Yeah, it started in New York in the early 80s, and it just grew bigger and bigger and bigger and more secretive and more wealthier people. And, I'd say there was a few hundred in it at any given time. People would come and go, but there are people, like the people who are in it now have been involved in the group for, probably 40 plus years.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And so was there 3 tiers of hierarchy going up to Sharon Gans, or was there even more than that? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Sharon was at the top. She had like 2 or 3 lieutenants, and there were probably about um, uh, I would say 5 or 6 levels within of hierarchy in the group. And she kept everyone very separate from each other also. And
So it's compartmentalization techniques. Yeah.
exactly, compartmentalized, and in order to keep the flow of information from happening, it was also a way of creating surprises, which she always promised to people.
And there's a lot more in this book. It's really a great book, and it's great to talk with you and see that it really is a present day book with this whole thing going on with the Fellowship of Friends of Google. That just like blew my mind just talking to you now. I had no connection between the school and that. So that's amazing. Is there anything you'd like to add, Spencer, or anything I missed before we wrap this up?
No, not really. I mean, just that, if you find yourself in, or find family members or whatever in situations like that, there are experts out there. You mentioned Rick Ross. He's great. And, there are lots of resources there. So I just want to point that out and hope that if you're in situations like this or know people who are, you get help. And it's possible.
You have like 9 telltale signs you're in a cult. You explain a lot of stuff. There's a lot more in this book. And there's an audio book for this too, right?
Yeah, the audiobook came out the same day, July 5th.
July 5th, yeah, so very recently, just in the last 10 days. And your social media is, you're on Instagram and Facebook at official Spencer Schneider, and Spencer Schneider on Facebook. If people want to reach out to you, is that the best place to do it?
Yeah, you can also go to my website, which is Spencer-Schneider. And you can go to cultrevolt.com, and you'll find my information there, and love to hear from people. Happy to talk to people.
And I'll put those in the show notes, links in the show notes. Thanks so much for your time. Fascinating discussion. Again, the title of the book, you can get it now, Manhattan Cult Story, My Unbelievable True Story of Sex, Crimes, and Chaos and Survival by Spencer Schneider. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Stay there.